Okay, Mark, what pieces do you have here? What are you sewing?
Okay, so we've got the two front pieces. The first thing you need to do when you're sewing a shawl collar is to sew the centre backs together. So you can see by the little design here, these are my right sides. So I've got the right sides together, and my seam allowance down the centre back of the collar here is 1 centimetre. So I'm just going to sew that at 1 centimetre. And you can see now that when I open that up, that's actually joined together. So you can see, I mean, it's a bit hard to do, but you can see that that will actually go right around the back neck now.
Yep.
Okay, so that's our front pieces, and these are our facing pieces, and the same thing. Obviously, they have to match. So again, I've got my right sides together. So the interfacing would be on this side of the fabric, if you're using interfacing, which most of you would be. So right sides together, and again, 1 centimetre seam down the back here. And the reason we have, like on our pre-cut jacket, we have a 1 centimetre seam, even though the neck edge and the out of the collar edge are usually 0.6. The reason we have 1 centimetre here is we need that seam pressed open, and generally on most fabrics it's easier to press open a 1 centimetre seam than it is a 0.6 seam. Okay, now I'm just going to press these open.
Okay, remember, pressing is your friend in good construction. Even the internal details that no one will see.
They'll all shine through one way or another.
As Christian Dior said, it's all about your undergarments. Or
something like that.
Something like that. I don't.
So this is the outer garment there. You see the shoulder. This is the back neck, and the other shoulder with the back. And all of this angle here is going to be different on your garments, but the actual construction should be the same.
Yep.
So don't freak out if yours doesn't look exactly like this.
Okay, so you're putting the right sides together again of the...
So right sides together. So the interfacing will be on this side, obviously, the seams on the inside. So we'll match up the centre back here. Centre back seams matched. I've also given myself some notches here along the edge of the collar, and I know it's only a 6mm seam, so just make sure that if you do put notches on this seam, they have to be very small so you don't clip in past the stitch line. I've also got my notches where my break point is, just to help me sew them together. And I'm going to start sewing from the hem. So this is the outer edge of the collar that I'm sewing together.
And your seam allowance is?
And I've done a 6mm seam allowance here. Some of you might have done a 1 centimetre seam allowance, depending, like if you've got a bulky fabric, you might have done a 1 centimetre seam allowance. But I'm just doing 0.6. So when you're sewing, just match as you go along, just sew from one lot of notches to the other. And just watch it around as you go up into into the centre back. The fabric will go onto the bias, and even if yours is interfaced, it will still stretch through the back here. So just be careful that you don't stretch the fabric, because if you stretch the bias as you're sewing it, it will stay stretched.
And you'll get a ripply collar.
Yeah, you've got a wobbly edge to it, so be careful about that. So just matched up the back. After you've done past there, just watch to see that your seam allowances is still laying flat and that one hasn't twisted over the other one. Matching my notches up to get to the next point.
And of course, Mark sews without pins, but if you need to put pins at the notches and the centre back to help you, that's advisable if you need that.
Exactly. Especially, I mean, this is 2 layers of calico without interfacing, which can be a lot different to if you're sewing, you know, like 2 layers of really thick wool. So, you know, if these were thick layers of wool, you might need like a, you know, a pin every 10 centimeters or so, just to help you hold those 2 layers together. Okay, so that was one long strip, sewn that all the way. Now, before I give this a press, what I'm going to do is understitch. And remember that when your collar's done, it will actually be, like it'll be bagged out this way. So we'll pull that through, the facing will go to the inside. And this is going to roll back. So even though it's called a facing, it actually, like your pre-cut jacket, it becomes the lapel of the jacket. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to do some understitching along this collar here, just to help hold that seam under. So the way that we're going to do that, we're going to find where our break point was, which we had notched here. And I'm going to start about 5 or 6 centimeters up from that point. That's where I'm going to start the understitching. And that's because when this collar folds back, it'll fold back, like I'll have a buttonhole here at the break point, and then it'll roll back from this point. And the closer you have your understitching to that break point, the more chance is that you're going to see it. Okay, so we're going to use that notch there. We're going to come up about 5 or 6 centimeters. We're going to push this seam allowance towards the body of the garment. So we've got the facing here, push the seam allowance towards the body of the garment and hold that in place. Just to check again, so I'm going to start here. You can put a pin in there, measure that and put a pin in there if you want to, but I'm just going to do it by eye. Put this under the foot. Now a pin stitch, and I didn't explain this very well in the jacket video, a pin stitch actually has to go on top of this fabric. So it's going to go through the layers, it's going to go through this layer and it's going to go through both seam allowances. It's in the other video, it came across that you were actually stitching on this side, but that's not helping anything. It's not doing the job. So we actually need to stitch through this side of the fabric, on the body of the jacket, through the jacket and through both of the seam allowances on the inside here. Let's do a back tack. And so what you're doing is you're running the seam here along the inside edge of the foot. So line this up at the inside edge of the foot there.
There we go, back in focus. Can maybe just... Okay.
I can't.
So the foot is lined up with...
I can't.
Trying to show them.
I can't sew and with the camera in front of me.
So, all right. So the right side of the foot is lined up with the seam junction, basically. Yeah. And so you're just stitching. So
it's the foot's running along in that side, that side of. So it's the inside of the foot is running along the seam there, and so the pin stitch, and you can see here, so there's the seam and the pin stitch is just sitting on top there, so that when this folds back, see that tucks under nicely, and so that you don't see, so it's no chance it's going to sit like that. It'll roll over and tuck under. Okay, so we're just going to do that from, it's a lengthy explanation, but a valuable one. So again, where this is going onto the bias, you can see rather than me pulling this way and stretching the bias, I'm actually pulling the fabric out. So pulling it this way. So again, so the edge doesn't go, so the bias edge doesn't go all wobbly. All right, now I just have to check down here. So there's my break point, and I'm just going to go 4 or 5 centimeters up from there. Where's it going? Do a back tack there. And you can see now, like once that's pressed, nicely. You get a nice sharp edge. You get the understitching. Obviously, it'll be in matching thread, so you won't be able to see it. If you're working with a really bulky fabric, the pin stitch might sort of fall into the seam here. So you can use a slightly wider. I mean, even if you've got a centimetre seam allowance, you can this pin stitch here could actually turn into a foot width stitch. So it might end up a couple of millimetres away, but it'll depend on the thickness of your fabric. And
that just helps the collar to fall as it should, keeps the seam allowance in place.
Yeah, and from the balance notch, this is my balance notch. From the balance notch down, I'm not going to bother about about understitching along there. I'm just going to give that a press. So because obviously that facing goes back that way, but this one has to roll over that way.
Yeah.
Okay.